So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November 1st program for the Rotary E-Club of District 7710. Tonight, we welcome John White, the Vice President of Public Policy with the Greater Durham Chamber of Commerce. He is a full-time lobbyist for the Chamber and its members, overseeing legislative matters at the local, state, and federal levels of government. To help keep Chamber members informed, he staffs two Chamber committees, the local and state and federal government committee, along with the transportation committee. John also works very closely with community nonprofits, Durham City and County, as well as representatives from local universities and colleges. Everyone, please welcome John.
Well, good evening. How are you all doing this evening?
Doing well, thanks.
This is impressive. This was not what I anticipated at all, so I'm kind of blown away, so forgive me. I am pitch hitting this evening for the two co-chairs. They are really the face of the campaign. I'm the behind the scenes, more of the, I suppose, the wizard from the Wizard of Oz, going back to your original question this evening. But the two co-chairs being Michael Goodman, Vice President of Real Estate for Capital Broadcasting, and Farad Ali, President and CEO for the Institute of Minority Economic Development located in downtown Durham. So those two gentlemen are leading the efforts for this year's 2016 Durham County Education Bonds Committee. And so Newman is someone who needs no introduction. I know you all know Newman. Newman is a person who I think a lot of, and is someone we recruited to take part in the committee efforts. And so the committee overall, their efforts and their focus is to try to get out the word about these bonds. State statute, to kind of put things into context, I appreciate the introduction because it does help. I didn't realize so many of you were located right here in the Triangle region, but one thing I'll say is that just about every county has either a sales tax referenda on the ballot or either a bond or a series of bonds on the ballot. So for example, Wake County has the transit sales tax referenda on the ballot, and Guilford County has 4 bonds on the ballot. I believe Orange County as well. I know Fayetteville, Mecklenburg, so on and so forth. So state statute was changed a few years ago that requires bonds to go on during a presidential year. So this is the first time in quite a while, if not in the history of Durham County putting bonds on the ballot, that it's been during a presidential year. Typically, it's been during a municipal election. And so when you hear those two things, the first thing you can automatically assume is there's a greater turnout with a presidential. Of course, it's more popular, and so more people are going to be aware of what's going on. Unfortunately, bonds are something that are just not as talked about, and so bonds are in Durham County. These are the last 4 questions on the back side of the ballot. So one of the things that the committee has been doing is trying to make sure people know about the bonds and are informed of the bonds. Whether it be from going around and speaking with groups like this. We've spoken, this is about the 3rd or 4th Rotary Club that we will have taken part in, and it's great just to be a part of all of these groups because it does help to get the word out. And so the bonds are paid for through 2.5% ad valorem tax, which is a property tax if passed. And so what does that equate to? That equates to about $2.08 per $100,000 of property value, or $25 annually for a $100,000 home. So if you have a $300,000 home, it's $75 annually. And so on our ballot for the Durham County general election, we have 4 bonds on the ballot. Those 4 bonds being a $90 million bond for Durham Public Schools, a $44 million bond for the main library renovation in downtown Durham, $20 million bond for Durham Technical Community College, and a $14.1 million bond for the Museum of Life and Science, totaling $170 million. And so typically when people hear that number, they go, wow, it's a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but from a county standpoint, from a government standpoint, it's really not a lot of money. How does it compare to past bonds? It's actually less than some of the past bonds that we put on the ballot. It's actually less than the last 2 bonds that we put on the ballot, to be exact. The last bond was a little bit over 200,000, and the other one was right at 200,000. And so ultimately, you've got $170 million broken down in the ways just mentioned. So for the school bonds, majority of the school bonds are going towards renovations and the rebuilding of two institutions in northern Durham County. So for example, that $90 million, about 60 million of it, and I'm rounding up by about $2 million, is going to 51 million to be exact, is going to renovate and rebuild Northern High School in Northern Durham. 7.3 million is going to close in Eno Valley Elementary School. And the remainder of the money is being spread throughout the system for security upgrades. There's about $2 million being spent on athletic programs and repairs to gymnasiums and track facilities. But ultimately, every school is getting a little bit of something. And so a lot of times people will say, well, wow, how did they end up giving so much money to these two schools? Well, you know, North Carolina, we passed a bill a few years back called the North Carolina Lottery. And so each county receives a little bit of money. And so basically what happened is Northern has been underserved from a financial standpoint as well as Eno Valley. And so that's how they rose to the top. Northern has a lot of different things that are falling apart in it. And they've just continued to try to keep it held together as best they could. But we're at a point now to where Northern High School needs to be rebuilt. It's one of the toughest looking schools, to use the nicest term possible, within the district. And so that's how it rose to the top. It was actually on the ballot on the bond a few years back, and they instead used the money for technical upgrades for technology system-wide, because they realized that they were falling behind system-wide from a technology standpoint, and the school could wait just a few years. Well, we're at that point where a few years has passed and we need to invest that money. So that's roughly the bulk of the money. Let me say something about the security aspects. When you hear security upgrades, in Eno Valley in particular, Eno Valley is built so that when you go out of each corridor, you go literally out under a breezeway. So you go through the main corridor in the front lobby, and then you go out, whether you go left or right, you go out into a breezeway, and then you go into another part of the building that's enclosed. And then if you keep walking through the building, it's kind of a hexagon. It's a hexagonal shape. And so as you keep going around in the circle, you have to go out every time you go out a series of doors, regardless of which way you go. Well, from a security standpoint, that's a very dangerous setup. And unfortunately, we have all heard about the incidents that took place in South Carolina a few weeks back. And so by enclosing the building, we're doing a couple of things. We're making the building more secure, but at the same time, we're also making it more efficient from an energy standpoint. And so kids don't have to take their coats with them when they go to the classroom, or excuse me, when they go to the library or to the cafeteria. Instead, they can move about and not have to worry about those additional garments, which is a safety concern in one aspect as well. But it's also helping to make the building more efficient. So all of the schools within Durham Public Schools are looking to have security upgrades so that we don't have unfortunate situations take place in Durham County. The community college bonds are $20 million, majority of which is going to the Newton Communication Building. And the Newton Communication Building is the dinosaur on campus. If you've ever been through Durham Technical Community College, the main campus, which is right off of Briggs Ave, you will know that it's kind of tough to determine where the front entrance is of the institution. And so one of the things that they're looking to do is they would like to shore it up a little bit so that at the end of the day, you will know where the front entrance is. But the majority of the money of that $20 million is going to upgrade the Newton Communication or Newton Technology Building and focus on manufacturing and technology aspects within the campus, but specifically within the Newton Communication Building. These bonds collectively really are part of the ecosystem of education and workforce development. And so as we look to put this money back into Durham Tech, we're really reinvesting for any student who looks to go to Durham Tech who wants to come out and get a job working in Northern Durham at some of the manufacturing facilities. And I say Northern Durham because we have very limited manufacturing in this area, but the bulk of it is up in Northern Durham and Trayburn Corporate Park. And so the companies up in Treyburn, as well as, in other areas throughout Durham, have relationships with Durham Tech. And what will happen is you create a streamlined approach so that students can go to school and then they'll come out and be able to at least get an interview. We can't guarantee a job by statute. The law won't allow that, but ultimately it does allow them to be able to work on the technology for many of the manufacturing sites that are in our backyard, so that when you come out, you are already familiar with how to work the technology, which helps you to get your foot in the door and hopefully be able to get that job. With these being bonds, and with the Chamber of Commerce, when I put my chamber hat back on, we are the economic development arm for Durham County. And so one of the things that we're constantly focused on is how do we leverage incentives, but at the same time be able to leverage those monies that taxpayers are paying so that we can help to get jobs for Durham taxpayers. And every county thinks about it like that. Now, you can't mandate that, but it is something that we work towards, given our relationship and our contract with Durham County government. So let's move on to the library facilities. The library facilities are asking for $44.3 million. And so when we were unpacking this, some of the questions we got originally were related to the price per square foot. And so one thing I asked the library to go back and take a look at, and I said, go back and give me the actual cost of construction. And sure enough, what came out of that 44.3 is $33 million of construction costs. So you've got about 11 million of overages, and about 6 million of which specifically goes towards upgrading technology. Or you're talking about a state-of-the-art library. It's the only library left in the system that has not been upgraded. And so east, west, north, and south have all been upgraded, and the main library downtown is actually coming on board at the right time, given all of the renovations taking place in downtown Durham. The cool thing about the library is that while sometimes it can be expensive for people to find places to rent for public meetings or private events, the library's costs are going to be able to allow the general public to be able to take advantage of a state-of-the-art facility with 3 terraces. So you could do an outside event with a business or with a club and not feel as if you have to pay retail price for it that some of the hotels offer. And I think the hotels are great. But we have to have varying price points for everybody. And the renovation of this main library will allow us to continue to do that. From a programming standpoint, the library is focused on adult programming as well as on the children's programming. They have a maker space that's going to be also upgraded, as well as the continued focus on STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. I have to always think about that because it always grows a letter, I feel like, every few years. And so what you're seeing in front of you are the schematics related to the library, as well as the auditorium that I just saw flash by. But it's actually increasing the footprint of the library by 20,000 square feet. It's about 19 and some change to be exact. So it's taking the current 60-some thousand square feet and adding another 20,000 to it. If you are familiar with the Durham main library downtown, you'll know that it was built in the 1970s, and the space of which it's built on, it has a lot of parking around the structure downtown. Well, that's an old suburban kind of development. And so to take advantage of that space and to better utilize the acreage there, they're gonna blow the walls out. The library will shut down. And so ultimately it'll increase its footprint. The front door right now is currently facing WTBD ABC 11. They'd like to turn the front door so it's facing Liberty Street, which will allow people to better access the library. So overall, it's going to be a better library, and it's a phenomenal project just to kind of bear witness to and just to continue to learn about. One thing to keep in mind that I did not ever think about was the weight of each floor. And so when a library is engineered, one thing that we often think about is when we're doing price per square foot or some of the other construction cost, we don't think about the weight of a floor for a library. Our particular library, or any particular library, has to be able to take on the weight of the books. And this particular library maintains the North Carolina collection, which is the archive. So just a couple of things to keep in mind that honestly through this process I've learned about, which has been incredibly fascinating. So that takes us to the Museum of Life and Science. So the Museum of Life and Science. Like the library, let me also say both of these institutions have a footprint, annual traffic of about 500,000 visitors. And I don't have children, and so that was amazing for me to hear. I don't spend a lot of time at the museum, but when I hear those kind of numbers, it makes me really understand the value associated with this outside of what I just know the brand to be. And so the price point for this is $14.1 million. The library has a program to where if you can't afford to buy a membership, you can buy a $5 a year membership at a reduced cost. It costs about $23,000 a day to run the library. And so when you break that 14.1 million, you break it into basically two categories. 7 million is going to upgrade exhibit space. Currently, the library's footprint inside, it works, but it's still a little small, specifically on rainy days. So what you have is you have a demand for people to want to find something that is a extracurricular activity for their children to do, and ultimately they're limited on space. The other half of the 14.1 is another $7 million that's going to go to build a parking deck. And yeah, parking decks aren't the most sexiest thing to talk about, but it's really something that the library is in much need of. When I was learning about the needs associated with this request, it was interesting to hear. What happens with the demand on any given day is the parking lots fill up very quickly. They don't have the largest parking lots. And so what they've been forced to do for quite a while is they've been asking patrons to go over to the Durham Stadium on Duke Street, park there, and then catch a shuttle back to the museum. So when I heard this, I first started thinking about a mom and a dad traveling there, or maybe just a mom by herself with a child or two, and she's parking over here and she's trying to get that stroller out, or he's trying to get that stroller out. And I just said, wow, I can only imagine how difficult that could be. Typically what you would do is I may be tempted to turn around and not go to the museum that day personally. But what we've seen is that ultimately people continue to come to the museum and they're in much need of this. So that wraps up the 14.1 million. I think I covered all of them. I think I covered all of the bonds. So that's a total of $170 million collectively. I want to talk a little bit about the endorsements. So Wake County is doing their sales tax referendum related to transit. And so I've got a little bit of history on this topic because I had the fortunate pleasure of working on the 2011 Durham transit referendum, and Newman was also tapped to be a part of that. And so ultimately the endorsement list that we have is we're very proud of. And I tell you, it's been a grassroots effort, a grassroots campaign. When we originally started out, the co-chairs took a position of wanting to make sure that we polled the community to understand what the temperature was on all four issues. So let's take a step back. In May, the county did a poll, but at that time in May, they did not have the ballot questions prepared. And so around July, if not early August, I believe it was early August, the co-chairs agreed to do another poll because they had released the actual ballot questions. And so they wanted to put that out to the public and see how they ranked. And so we were glad to say that and glad to hear that all four of them went well above 50% in terms of voter approval and voter support. And so once we heard this, the co-chairs decided to go out and start speaking with groups and Rotary clubs about what these actual bonds were all about. And so what you see in front of you is a list of endorsements. There are over 17 endorsements, or roughly right at 17 endorsements from a variety of groups. And so we're very proud of that because ultimately, we believe that ultimately information is key. And so it's not about where you fall politically. We actually like to say that these are four bonds that you probably get the most ROI out of for a variety of reasons. And they're not partisan. These are nonpartisan issues. And so with politics being the topic du jour over the next week and have been over the last year, these are 4 issues that we feel like we can speak with the public about, help them to understand the value around and what the ROI is associated with their investment. So what you see in front of you is a list of different organizations that have come on board. Let me also say that we have reached out to many groups like Rotary clubs that have not necessarily been in a position to endorse. So we've spoken with Rougemont, Ruritan clubs, Mount Sylvan Ruritan Club, Bahama Ruritan Club, all of which are in northern Durham, as well as some groups in the southern end of town, and RTP, as well as at the Chamber of Commerce, which is noted on here, Downtown Durham Incorporated, and faith-based organizations. We have no opposition on this bond, which is a blessing. It's a very humbling experience, but we have no opposition. We had one organization that is a partisan group that really saw the value and decided to take no position at all. But that same group has decided to oppose other bonds and other sales tax referenda. Specifically, I know the one in Wake County, but we're very fortunate that they saw the value in this and just decided to not take a position. I think it was more of a broader approach versus anything specific to our 4 issues. The 4 issues here on the ballot we feel are solid. The county commissioners, we feel, got that right. It's tough to run a bond campaign when you have 4 issues that could be competing against each other. So for example, if you want to zero in on what I'm talking about, I think Guilford County has a pretty tough series of bonds. Those 4 issues seem to compete in some respects, at least from what voters have responded, given their polls when they polled in about the 20 percentile range. And so for us, we're fortunate to be able to say all of which went over 50%. So I can pause there and take any questions, but as you see in front of you, you have the, what we just had up on the screen was the campaign website, vote4bonds.com. Again, vote4bonds.com. We have yard signs, I think, everywhere in town, but if you'd like to have one, we've got plenty left, and we'd love for to have your support. And if you want to put one up in your yard, you can pick one up at the Museum of Life and Science.
Wonderful.